What's good? It's Woog. We have a young, undefeated, former champion, fresh off one of 2023's fights of the year, or maybe not so fresh off of a fight of the year. I mean, this thing was a brutal back and forth, ebb and flow war, and someone who is trying to angle and position themselves for a fight against Canelo Alvarez, taking on one of Canelo's 2023 opponents. We've got Jaime Munguia, 42 wins and 0 losses, versus John Ryder, 32 wins and 6 losses. Now, when Jaime Munguia first really hit the scene, he was facing Saddam Ali, who had just beaten Miguel Cotto for a share of the 154-pound title. I think it was the WBO 154-pound title. Saddam Ali was a longtime 147-pound fighter. So Jaime Munguia, who was actually trying to get a fight against Triple G at the time, challenged Saddam Ali and absolutely steamrolled him. I mean, this was one of those fights where the boxing world said, well, damn. I mean, Jaime Munguia looked huge at 154. He was just a force. And then after winning that WBO 154-pound title, he then beat Liam Smith via decision. That was a pretty hard fought, but clear win for Jaime Munguia. So that was a very impressive back-to-back set of victories. But after that, Jaime Munguia went on this run, if you want to call it that, of super disappointing, uninspiring fights, just matchmaking wise, just fighting nothing but C, B minus, C minus level opponents, or worse in some cases. So after that Liam Smith fight, he defended his title successfully another 4 times. One of those fights was against Dennis Hogan, and a lot of the viewers thought that Dennis Hogan should have actually gotten the win against Jaime Munguia. Munguia got away with one there, but Munguia had 5 successful title defenses. Then he moved up to middleweight and had nothing but uninspiring opponents. He fought Gary O'Sullivan, Toriano Johnson, who was actually a very difficult fight for Munguia. If you watch that, that was a very back and forth, action-packed shootout. It took for Munguia to basically split Toriano Johnson's lip very graphically. It was a nasty, nasty cut, which caused the fight to be stopped in the 6th round. And then after beating Toriano Johnson, Jaime Munguia fought Camille Surameta, Gabriel Rosado, which I still don't know how Gabriel Rosado lasted the whole 12 rounds. Munguia hit him with everything but the kitchen sink. That was a very brutal beating. Gabriel Rosado showed a ton of heart, persisting and enduring that 12 rounds. And then Munguia fought Demetrius Ballard. So that was Munguia's 5 fights at middleweight. O'Sullivan, Toriano Johnson, Surameta, Gabriel Rosado, Demetrius Ballard. Very uninspiring. And you know, some of that time involved Munguia being Demetrius Andrade's mandatory challenger for Andrade's WBO middleweight title, and Munguia wasn't interested in taking that fight. And at the time, Andrade was starved for a big opponent. So that just seemed to be a very good fight that kind of made itself. It was never made. And so a lot of the boxing public was just looking at Munguia's career and looking at Golden Boy and just saying, what the hell? I mean, the guy clearly has the tools to be an elite or near elite fighter. He's got tons of firepower. He's got a lot of volume. His defense is questionable, and we'll get to that later. But Munguia clearly has the goods to be a force, but he just hasn't been stepping up in competition. So then he hits 168, fights Jimmy Kelly, knocks him out in the 5th, fights Gonzalo Correa, knocks him out in the 3rd round. And Correa, by the way, is one of Munguia's only southpaw opponents over the past several years. John Ryder is a southpaw. And then Munguia finally has a step up. He fights Sergey Derevianchenko. Granted, Derevianchenko's been a middleweight. He was middleweight when he fought Daniel Jacobs, Triple G, Carlos Adames, Jermall Charlo. Derevianchenko's a 160 guy who went up to 168 to fight Munguia, and that resulted, again, in many people's 2023 fight of the year. In fact, I picked another fight. I picked that Espinoza versus Robeisy Ramirez, or should I say Robeisy Ramirez versus Espinoza. I picked that as the fight of the year, but under further evaluation, Munguia versus Derevianchenko very well could have been the 2023 fight of the year. That was the fight that I've seen listed as most people's fight of the year. So again, Munguia got hurt several times in that fight, but every time he got hurt, he started firing back, and then he would hurt Derevianchenko. Then every time Derevianchenko got hurt, he would end up firing back against Munguia. Munguia ended up dropping Derevianchenko in the 12th round, and that was largely the difference that allowed Munguia to edge a unanimous decision win over Derevianchenko, who now has lost very close fights against Daniel Jacobs, Triple G and Carlos Adames, and now against Jaime Munguia. Granted, the fights against Adames and Jermall Charlo weren't as close as those other three that I mentioned. And now Munguia is about to fight John Ryder, who, lost a lot of fights at middleweight, and then he went up to 168 and he had a very good run. He lost a very controversial close decision against Callum Smith. Most people who watched that thought that John Ryder deserved that decision. I mean, he was coming inside on Callum Smith, who never really got the fight to where he wanted to be at range and was unable to just line Ryder up with that signature left hook or even that straight right. Callum Smith struggled mightily with John Ryder, who then went on a 4-fight win streak. The last 2 of those were against Daniel Jacobs and Zach Parker, and that's what put him in a position to fight Canelo Alvarez, because John Ryder was, I believe, Canelo's WBO mandatory. So Canelo fought him in May of 2023, where Canelo clearly won like the early rounds, except for maybe one of the early rounds. He dropped John Ryder in the 5th round, and then he started to tire like he has in several of his recent fights. John Ryder started to rally a little bit in those later rounds, but Canelo still earned a clear unanimous decision win against John Ryder. By the way, before that knockdown, like a couple rounds before that 5th round knockdown, Canelo hit John Ryder with his jab. On the broadcast, they said it was a right hand that smashed the nose and bloodied the face of John Ryder. I really saw that as being Canelo's jab that smashed Ryder's nose. But Ryder just showed a ton of heart. He showed a ton of endurance. Again, he battled back in those late rounds. So when I size up Jaime Munguia versus John Ryder, there are a couple X factors here. One, Derevianchenko again gave Munguia all he could handle. But to Munguia's credit, he finished strong. Again, he knocked him down in the 12th round and arguably won the 11th round. Again, Derevianchenko isn't a true super middleweight. He's a middleweight. John Ryder is a 168 super middleweight. So this is probably the best super middleweight opponent that Munguia has faced. But, technically, Derevianchenko and John Ryder are both shorter fighters, but they're very different style-wise. I look at Derevianchenko as being a better athlete in terms of his movement and being able to jump into the pocket and then exit the pocket at an angle. I also look at Derevianchenko as being better at punching between his opponent's punches, basically threading the needle, where as Munguia started to open up, you would see Derevianchenko throw a couple bombs between those punches. Now, Munguia puts his punches together very well in combination, but even as he was putting together 2 to 4 punches, Derevianchenko would split those punches and catch Munguia super cleanly. Derevianchenko is more of a craftsman in that regard than John Ryder is. John Ryder is a patient, again, southpaw, but he's pretty good defensively. He keeps a high guard and he patiently comes forward. He'll try to catch your punches and then look for his opportunity to take a step inside and throw short punches and throw uppercuts and try to split your guard. Now, Canelo for John Ryder is much different than Munguia. Canelo is 5'8" and very efficient, economical in his punch output. Munguia is like 6'1", 6'2", and is very high volume, throwing, again, a bunch of combinations and just throwing punches, a lot of activity throughout the rounds. Whereas, again, Canelo is a patient stalker. Sometimes he'll go a good 5 to 8 seconds without throwing one punch. He'll just kind of change levels and keep his high shoulders, keep his chin tucked, high guard, and just kind of walk you down and looking for opportunities to absolutely splash you with 1 or 2 punches and make those punches count. Munguia, on the other hand, is looking to empty the clip, so to speak. He's looking to show you his whole arsenal, 2 to 4 punches at a time. And then he wants to kind of beat you back and work you back, punch you into the corner, and then really let his hands go and weaken you. Now, John Ryder spent a lot of that fight against Canelo with his back on or near the ropes. You can't afford to do that against Munguia. Not to say Munguia punches harder than Canelo. I mean, we've seen Canelo stop some of the best fighters at 168. But Munguia, again, throws so many damn punches to where it's going to earn him the rounds if you let him really let his hands go. So John Ryder, I'm assuming, is going to take some time and see what Munguia's got, and then open up on Munguia when he's got the opportunities. Again, step inside, throw some uppercuts, and wait for those moments where Munguia stops throwing punches to then start backing Munguia up. John Ryder doesn't fight well backing up, neither does Munguia. Both of these guys like to come forward, but in very different ways. So something's got to give here. Now, I mentioned Jaime Munguia's lack of defense earlier, right? Well, for the last several fights, Munguia was working with Eric Morales, the legendary Eric Morales. For this upcoming fight, Munguia is going to be working with the legendary Freddie Roach, who has been saying in interviews that they have been working and drilling ad nauseum on defense. Now, how much can a leopard change his spots from fight to fight? Like, how much of an improvement do you really expect on the defensive front from Jaime Munguia between his last fight against Derevianchenko, where again, that's one of those traumatizing fights that can change a fighter. Like, you listen to Munguia's interview after Derevianchenko and how he views that fight. He doesn't want too many more fights like that. That was a hellish kind of fight. So Munguia is open to advice on how to better defend himself. Now, that's not why, as far as I've read and heard, that's not why Munguia and Morales parted. I didn't get the impression that Munguia was dissatisfied with the tutelage he was getting from Eric Morales and then therefore went with Freddie Roach at Wildcard. Instead, I heard that and read that Eric Morales is campaigning for, I believe, mayor of Tijuana. So he wasn't able to dedicate himself full time to training. So again, I wonder what differences we can expect from Jaime Munguia under the tutelage of Freddie Roach. Do you expect him to be able to like catch and shoot? I don't really see I don't expect too much of a change in terms of his in-ring temperament. I expect him to still want to be the bully. I expect him to still throw a lot of punches. Maybe you can get more head movement, but like once he starts getting hit and once the bullets start flying and once the fight starts to intensify, do you expect Munguia to be able to apply what he's learned? Now, I assume that when if it's a heated round where the bullets are flying and both guys get hit a lot, I expect Freddie Roach to be reiterating what he wants Munguia to do when Munguia walks back to the corner. But I just don't see too much changing from one fight to the next. Now, maybe gradually, if he stays with Freddie Roach and they continue to drill these things, maybe by the second or third fight, that will change. But again, Munguia is not going to be under the same type of intense heat, I don't expect, versus John Ryder that he was against Derevianchenko. Again, Derevianchenko, remember the fight against Triple G, how much heat Triple G was under because of how Derevianchenko stays low and he's moving his feet in a way where he's athletically getting into different angles and positions to be able to jump in. John Ryder doesn't do that. John Ryder takes a step forward and then a step forward, but he's not hopping around and moving around a whole bunch in the way that Derevianchenko is. He isn't as active legs-wise, but he is putting his own version and his own type of pressure on his opponent. Now, I expect John Ryder to be able to move forward in a different way against Munguia that he wasn't able to against Canelo. Canelo just has a totally different style. Again, he keeps the high guard and he will make you pay for opening up. Jaime Munguia, I don't see as being as clever a counterpuncher as Canelo. So it's almost not worth bringing up how John Ryder performed against Canelo other than to say he performed well in the later rounds. It's almost not a worthy comparison because the styles are so different. Just like it's almost not worthy of comparing Derevianchenko to John Ryder, although they're both shorter fighters for those divisions. I almost feel like Liam Smith might be more, even though that fight was several years ago, that was 2018 when Munguia fought Liam Smith, but I almost feel like that's more appropriate in terms of finding an opponent that somewhat carries a similar style. Now, granted, Liam Smith is not a southpaw. And again, this was down at 154 where Munguia was just a huge guy, a major force. At 168, I'm expecting people strength-wise, punching power-wise, and so forth to have kind of caught up with Munguia as he goes up in weight. Again, he's only had a few fights at 168 and he hasn't fought any bona fide good 168 guys yet. So how is Munguia, gonna take John Ryder's punches? I expect John Ryder to be durable enough to withstand Munguia's heat, at least in the early and middle rounds. He's gonna get blasted. Munguia hits everybody that he fights a lot. But John Ryder has proven to be able to take a punch and to keep on coming forward and applying his own pressure. So I expect Munguia to get off to a better start. It might be a fun first couple of rounds or so, but I think Munguia is going to win the early rounds. I think that John Ryder is going to come on strong in the middle rounds, but I think that the younger, much younger, Jaime Munguia, who's only 27 years old, John Ryder is now 35 years old. So I expect Jaime Munguia to be more voluminous than John Ryder. I think Munguia is going to win a lot of the rounds where nobody gets dropped and nothing super dramatic happens. He just throws a lot of punches. Again, John Ryder is going to have to be patient unless he just kind of goes for broke and tries to stay in Jaime Munguia's chest, which might be his best chance at winning. But I think that Munguia is going to show out. Yes, I think that that was a very tough fight against Derevianchenko. Yes, that might shorten Munguia's career to a degree. Like, maybe we don't see the effects of that fight until a few fights down the road, but there's just no way that you have a fight like that and suffer no ill effects from that type of a brutal fight. But, you know, there's a good amount of pressure on Jaime Munguia here. John Ryder, on the other hand, has been given opportunity after opportunity. He's been having this late career resurgence, and because of how competitive he's been, whether it was against Callum Smith with the controversial loss or the somewhat controversial, close, could have gone either way win against Daniel Jacobs, to the win against Zach Parker, to the showing in a loss against Canelo Alvarez. These performances have given him more and more opportunities, and he's kind of becoming a litmus test at 168. And Jaime Munguia is going to have to not only win, I believe, but he's going to have to look good in winning against John Ryder to have a chance at getting that coveted fight against Canelo Alvarez. I expect Jaime Munguia to get the job done here. I mean, it would be very interesting if we do see Jaime Munguia suffering under the pressure of John Ryder and unable to like drop Ryder or demonstrably hurt Ryder. If Munguia is not able to deeply affect Ryder, he could be in for a tough one, but I think that he's got enough volume to push Ryder back and to keep applying the pressure and to win those rounds, again, with his volume. The question I had was, is Munguia going to be able to stop the highly durable John Ryder? I don't think he'll be able to do it. It's also going to be interesting to see how Munguia, with his lack of defense, again, he is under the tutelage of Freddie Roach, but I don't expect a ton of dramatic and noticeable change in the defensive department. How is he going to handle a southpaw in John Ryder, especially if he doesn't see that straight left coming, especially if he's vulnerable to getting hit by those uppercuts in close? I still think that he's going to be able to hit John Ryder a lot at range, being the much taller fighter. Even though Callum Smith wasn't able to do that, and Callum Smith is taller than Jaime Munguia. So this one could be interesting. I just think that Jaime Munguia is going to perform very well here, but I don't think he's going to be able to get the stoppage. You know, for a while, I was thinking I was going to pick Munguia to get that stoppage of John Ryder. I just think that it's more likely that Munguia is winning the rounds. John Ryder is showing a game effort and is able to win a few rounds against Munguia. Maybe it results in like a 116 to 112 type of scorecard. I expect John Ryder to obviously be very competitive, and I don't think that Munguia's punch at 168 is as devastating as it was at 154 or even 160. Even though, again, we never saw Munguia against the elite guys at 160. He did pack a punch. He won most of his fights there by knockout. I think the only guy to carry him the distance was Gabriel Rosado at middleweight. But I don't think Munguia is going to be as devastating a puncher at 168. So I think that John Ryder is going to be able to handle himself and go the full 12 rounds. I'm taking Munguia to win this one. Something like, again, 116 to 112. And I, for one, hope that he does not get the next fight against Canelo. I just don't think that fight over fight, his fight-by-fight schedule has merited a fight against Canelo. And I also hope that Canelo doesn't fight Jermall Charlo, which I've been hearing. I hope that neither of these guys is the guy who fights Canelo. Really, the only guy I want Canelo to fight right now is David Benavidez. And if not David Benavidez, maybe Terrence Crawford. I mean, just because of the intrigue there. But not Jermall Charlo, especially not after that performance against David Benavidez's brother, Jose Benavidez Jr. I mean, did that fight tell you that Jermall Charlo is ready for Canelo Alvarez? I mean, I wanted to see them two fight like 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 7 years ago. You know, I've wanted to see them fight for some time, but not this version of Jermall Charlo. Let Jermall Charlo fight either Demetrius Andrade or go back to 160, maybe fight a unification fight against Janibek Alamhanala, or handle business in a WBC consolidation fight against Carlos Adames. I want to see Jermall Charlo fight a fight on that level. But we'll see who wins the Canelo sweepstakes. We'll see how Jaime Munguia fares against John Ryder. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if they make Canelo versus Munguia next, and then maybe after that, Canelo fights David Benavidez, even though, you know, people are trying to size up what the next 2 fights of his 3-fight deal with PBC is going to be. I'm thinking, well, if you fight David Benavidez for your second fight, let's say you lose that fight, the rematch could be the 3rd fight. Or you could fight Terrence Crawford for one and David Benavidez for the other, or vice versa, fight David Benavidez, then Terrence Crawford. It's not like you've got to waste a fight, essentially, for your second fight in that 3-fight deal. So no, I don't want to see Canelo fight Jaime Munguia, Jermall Charlo, Edgar Berlanga. Come on. But I am intrigued by this fight between Jaime Munguia versus John Ryder. Again, this is a significant step up for Jaime Munguia. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments. Who do you see winning this one and how? And depending on what we see as a result of this fight, how do you want to see this play into the Canelo sweepstakes? And how do you think it will play into the Canelo sweepstakes? What's interesting about this as well, Canelo for a while was saying he doesn't want to fight another Mexican fighter, right? I mean, Jaime Munguia is a Mexican, and he's not a Mexican-American like David Benavidez, right? So Canelo, if he fights Jaime Munguia, he'll be going against what he said there. He'll be, in my view, rewarding bad behavior, because I've seen Canelo, use a lot of reasoning like, hey, he's got to do more work. David Benavidez has to beat, Caleb Plant, do some more work so you could earn the shot against me. Well, I mean, what has Jaime Munguia done to earn the shot against Canelo? So, and then also, Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo have been like bitter rivals ever since they started having their contractual dispute before Canelo left Golden Boy. You mean to tell me you're going to fight a Mexican, not Mexican-American, but a Mexican, somebody who hasn't done the work to deserve a shot at Canelo Alvarez, too, and you're going to work with Oscar De La Hoya cross-promotionally to fight Jaime Munguia? Come on. But yeah, give me your thoughts on this one in the comments. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.